Sarah Chun pushed her custodial cart through the metal corridors of Thule Air Base, the wheels squeaking against the polished concrete floor. At 32, she had perfected the art of invisibility that came with wearing a gray janitor's uniform in a world of military green. The December wind howled outside the Arctic installation, rattling the reinforced windows as she made her evening rounds through the administrative wing. Staff Sergeant Mills emerged from the communications room, his broad shoulders filling the doorway as he spotted her approaching with her supplies. His laughter echoed off the walls when he noticed her struggling to maneuver the cart around a corner. "Can you handle the dangerous job of emptying our trash cans tonight?" he asked with mock concern. "Or should we call in some real soldiers to help you out?" The 3 Marines behind him joined his amusement, their voices carrying the easy confidence of men who had never questioned their place in the hierarchy. Sarah nodded quietly and continued past them toward the security office, where the night's real work waited. Her eyes swept the corridor's camera positions with the practiced efficiency of someone who understood surveillance better than most people understood their own reflection. The blind spot near the emergency exit remained exactly where she had calculated it would be, and the patrol schedule posted on the duty board confirmed what she already knew about the base's predictable routines. The security office hummed with the soft glow of multiple monitors displaying feed from cameras positioned around the installation's perimeter. As Sarah emptied the wastebasket beside the main console, her peripheral vision caught the thermal imaging display showing the northwestern approach to the base. 6 bright signatures moved in formation across the screen, 2 disciplined to be wildlife and 2 coordinated to be lost civilians. She memorized their position and trajectory while maintaining her focus on the mundane task of replacing the trash bag. "Have you been out there lately?" she asked herself silently, thinking about those of us who might be stationed in places like this during the holidays. The isolation of Arctic duty could break even experienced personnel, and Christmas Eve brought its own particular weight of separation from family and familiar places. Tonight felt different, though, charged with intention that had nothing to do with seasonal melancholy. Her cleaning route took her past the duty officer's station, where Captain Torres sat reviewing personnel reports with the methodical attention of someone trying to stay awake during a quiet shift. Sarah approached his desk and cleared her throat softly. "Sir, I found something unusual during my rounds outside earlier," she said, keeping her voice level and respectful. "There's a section of perimeter fence near Sector 7 that looks like it might have been cut. The edges were too clean for storm damage." Torres glanced up from his paperwork with the weary expression of an officer dealing with civilian concerns during a holiday shift. "That area gets hit pretty hard by the wind," he replied, already turning back to his reports. "Probably just storm damage from last week's weather. We'll have maintenance check it out after the weekend." His dismissal came with the automatic authority of someone accustomed to making decisions about base security without input from custodial staff. Sarah continued her rounds through the communications center, where the Christmas party preparations had left the usual military efficiency somewhat relaxed. Technicians had decorated their workstations with small personal items that would normally violate regulations, and the evening duty roster showed minimal staffing as most personnel gathered in the mess hall for the annual celebration. The installation's rhythm felt different tonight, vulnerable in ways that extended beyond the usual challenges of Arctic isolation. The thermal imaging display caught her attention again as she returned to empty additional trash receptacles. The 6 signatures had moved closer to the installation's outer perimeter, and their formation remained too precise for anything other than professional military movement. Sarah recognized the tactical spacing and approach angle from briefings she wasn't supposed to remember, in a life she wasn't supposed to have lived. Her hands continued their cleaning routine while her mind calculated distances, timing, and potential breach points. The emergency lighting system cast long shadows through the corridor as Sarah made her way toward the communications array housing. Her cart's squeaking wheels provided cover for her careful examination of the base's defensive positions, and her intimate knowledge of the building's maintenance systems gave her access to areas most personnel never considered. The heating vents, electrical conduits, and service tunnels formed a hidden network that connected every critical facility on the installation. Warning sirens began their wailing cry as the base's perimeter sensors detected what Sarah had seen 20 minutes earlier on the thermal display. The sudden noise shattered the evening's quiet routine, sending personnel scrambling from the Christmas party toward their emergency stations. Captain Torres burst from his office with his sidearm drawn, shouting orders into his radio, while trying to establish contact with the perimeter guards who were no longer responding to his calls. Sarah stood beside her custodial cart in the corridor, surrounded by the controlled chaos of a military installation responding to a security breach. The Marines who had laughed at her dangerous trash can duties now ran past her without a glance, their attention focused on threats they couldn't yet see or understand. Communications went dead as the emergency lighting flickered and died, plunging sections of the base into darkness that felt deliberate rather than accidental. The installation's commanding officer had planned for equipment failure, power outages, and personnel emergencies, but the Christmas Eve timing and surgical precision of this attack suggested an enemy who understood military psychology as well as tactical doctrine. Sarah recognized the signature of professional operators in the way communications had been severed first, isolating the base from outside support before the main assault began. Emergency backup power restored partial lighting to the corridors as Sarah positioned herself near the intersection of three main hallways. From this location, she could monitor movement toward the command center, communications array, and personnel quarters while maintaining the appearance of a civilian caught in an unfolding crisis. Her cart provided both cover and concealment for equipment that wasn't standard custodial issue, hidden in compartments designed to look like cleaning supply storage. The sound of gunfire erupted from the direction of the main gate, followed by explosions that shook the building's reinforced structure. Sarah counted the distinctive reports of automatic weapons and recognized the caliber and firing patterns of weapons that weren't standard American military issue. The attack had moved from infiltration to active assault, and the base's holiday skeleton crew would struggle to mount an effective defense against what sounded like a well-equipped professional force. Captain Torres appeared at the end of the corridor, blood streaming from a cut above his left eye as he tried to coordinate his scattered personnel through a handheld radio that crackled with static and partial transmissions. His eyes met Sarah's across the distance, and she saw the moment when his dismissive attitude toward the civilian cleaner transformed into something approaching desperate hope for any assistance available. 8 minutes had passed since the sirens first sounded, and Sarah's trained ear told her that the base's defensive positions were being systematically eliminated by attackers who knew exactly where to strike for maximum effect. The Christmas party had become a liability, concentrating personnel in a single location that could be easily controlled or eliminated. Outside, the Arctic wind continued its relentless howling, masking the sounds of an assault that had been planned with surgical precision and executed with professional competence. Sarah Chin stood in the corridor beside her custodial cart, no longer just a dismissed civilian cleaner, but not yet revealed as something far more dangerous. The moment of decision approached with the certainty of artillery fire, and she understood that maintaining her carefully constructed cover might cost the lives of everyone on the base. The emergency lights cast her shadow long and dark against the wall, and in that shadow lay 18 years of training that Thule Air Base had never suspected existed within their quiet night custodian. The main assault erupted with coordinated precision as 8 black-clad figures poured through breaches in the perimeter fence that Sarah had tried to report hours earlier. Russian voices barked commands in the darkness beyond the emergency lighting, their tactical discipline evident in the way they split into 2 foreman teams targeting the communications array and command center simultaneously. The enemy had studied Thule Air Base's layout with the thoroughness of professionals who understood that Christmas Eve offered them maximum advantage against a skeleton crew. Inside the mess hall, the annual Christmas party transformed from celebration to chaos in the span of 3 seconds. 12 Marines who had been sharing stories and holiday food suddenly found themselves trapped as the lights died, and the building shook under controlled explosions that severed power and communication lines. Corporal Jackson tried to reach the emergency lighting controls while Private Williams scrambled toward the weapons locker, but neither man had training for this type of coordinated assault. Captain Torres pressed his back against the corridor wall as automatic gunfire echoed through the installation's metal framework. His handheld radio produced nothing but static when he attempted to contact the perimeter guards, and the backup generators that should have restored full power remained silent in their housing units. The enemy had done their homework, identifying and neutralizing every system that would allow the base to call for help or mount an organized defense. Sarah watched through a reinforced window as the assault unfolded with textbook efficiency. The attacking force moved with the coordinated precision she recognized from her own training, their equipment and tactics indicating military backgrounds that went far beyond irregular forces or terrorist organizations. These were professionals executing a mission they had rehearsed until every movement became automatic, and their success depended on the base personnel's inability to respond effectively to this level of coordinated violence. Sergeant Rodriguez appeared in the armory doorway, his sidearm drawn as he tried to reach the heavy weapons storage. A figure in winter camouflage emerged from behind a support column and struck him with the butt of an assault rifle, dropping the sergeant to his knees before zip-tying his hands behind his back. The attacker spoke accented English as he demanded information about the location of classified Arctic defense protocols, his voice carrying the controlled menace of someone accustomed to interrogating prisoners. The internal conflict that had been building since Sarah first spotted the thermal signatures now reached its breaking point. Every instinct from 18 years of Delta Force training screamed at her to eliminate the threats systematically, starting with the nearest hostile and working outward until the base was secure. But revealing her capabilities would expose Operation Phantom Crown, the deep cover mission that had placed her at Thule Air Base to assess security vulnerabilities that were now being exploited with devastating effectiveness. Through another window, Sarah caught sight of the enemy leader directing his team's movements with hand signals that indicated advanced military training. The man's face triggered recognition from classified briefings she had received before her assignment to Thule, and the memory crystallized with chilling clarity. Ivan Kozlov, former Russian Spetsnaz captain turned mercenary, architect of the 2019 assault on a Norwegian Arctic installation that had resulted in the capture of NATO defense protocols and the deaths of 6 personnel. Kozlov's presence elevated this from a simple raid to something approaching an act of war. His team wasn't here for equipment or supplies, but for the classified information that made Thule Air Base strategically valuable to foreign intelligence services. The Arctic defense protocols contained positioning data for early warning systems, satellite communication frequencies, and response procedures that would compromise NATO's northern defensive strategy if they fell into enemy hands. Sarah's position near the intersection of 3 corridors gave her clear sight lines to multiple areas where the assault was unfolding. She could see Captain Torres trying to rally his scattered personnel while enemy forces closed in from 2 directions, and the growing desperation in his movements told her that he understood how quickly the situation was deteriorating. The base's commanding officer had prepared for many contingencies, but not for facing Ivan Kozlov's level of professional competence on Christmas Eve. The sound of breaking glass came from the direction of the communications center as the enemy team completed their systematic destruction of equipment that could have summoned help from outside the installation. Sarah calculated that the nearest military support was at least 4 hours away by helicopter, assuming anyone even knew that Thule Air Base was under attack. Kozlov had chosen his timing perfectly, striking when holiday schedules and Arctic weather conditions would delay any rescue attempt. Emergency lighting flickered back to partial functionality as someone managed to restart one of the backup generators, casting irregular shadows through corridors that now felt more like a battlefield than a military installation. Sarah used the restored illumination to assess the tactical situation more clearly, noting the positions of both friendly and hostile forces while maintaining her cover as a trapped civilian. Her custodial cart remained beside her, its hidden compartments containing equipment that could change the balance of this engagement within minutes. 3 Marines from the Christmas party attempted to reach the command center through the eastern corridor, but concentrated gunfire forced them back toward the mess hall, where they would be trapped with the rest of the holiday gathering. Sarah watched their retreat with growing recognition that conventional military response wasn't going to succeed against Kozlov's superior planning and execution. The enemy had studied this base's weaknesses and personnel limitations with the thoroughness of professionals who understood exactly what they were attacking. Captain Torres appeared at the far end of the corridor, blood now streaming more heavily from the cut above his eye as he tried to coordinate a defense that was falling apart faster than he could organize it. His radio crackled with partial transmissions from isolated personnel, but the communications breakdown prevented any coherent response to an assault that had been designed to exploit exactly this type of confusion and isolation. Sarah's training told her that Kozlov would escalate to lethal force within the next few minutes, as his timeline compressed under the pressure of completing his mission before outside help could arrive. The professional courtyard positioning she observed through the windows suggested that he was preparing to make an example of captured personnel, using execution as psychological warfare against any remaining resistance. The decision crystallized when Sarah saw 3 Marines being forced at gunpoint toward the central courtyard where exterior lighting would make their deaths visible to anyone still fighting inside the installation. Kozlov understood that witnessing the execution of their comrades would break the will of the remaining defenders more effectively than additional combat. Private Chun, Corporal Williams, and Sergeant Martinez walked ahead of their captors with the resigned posture of soldiers who understood what was about to happen. 18 years of training overcame months of careful cover construction as Sarah abandoned her position beside the custodial cart and moved toward the maintenance access panel she had memorized during her first week at Thule Air Base. Operation Phantom Crown would be compromised the moment she drew her first weapon, but 12 American lives weighed more than any intelligence mission. The quiet civilian cleaner who had been dismissed and mocked was about to disappear, replaced by something far more dangerous than Ivan Kozlov had planned to encounter in this remote Arctic installation. The maintenance tunnel entrance opened silently under Sarah's practiced touch, revealing the hidden network of service passages that would allow her to move through the base without using corridors monitored by enemy forces. Her gray custodial uniform would provide perfect camouflage in the shadows between walls, and her intimate knowledge of the building's infrastructure gave her tactical advantages that no external assault force could have anticipated or prepared for during their mission planning. Sarah Chin stepped into darkness that felt more familiar than the bright corridors where she had spent months pretending to be someone else. Behind her, the sounds of combat continued as Captain Torres and his Marines struggled against an enemy they couldn't match with conventional tactics. Ahead of her lay a network of hidden passages that would allow her to emerge anywhere in the installation with the element of complete surprise, carrying skills that would transform this engagement from massacre to something approaching a fair fight. The maintenance tunnel stretched into blackness beyond the reach of emergency lighting, its concrete walls lined with pipes and electrical conduits that Sarah had mapped during her first month at Thule Air Base. 60 feet from the entrance, behind a false panel she had installed during a routine electrical inspection, lay equipment that no custodial worker should have possessed. Her fingers found the hidden latches automatically, muscle memory overriding months of careful civilian behavior as she retrieved the suppressed M110 rifle and tactical gear that transformed her from dismissed cleaner into something deadlier. Sarah's movements through the ventilation system carried the silent efficiency of someone who had spent years perfecting infiltration techniques in environments far more challenging than Arctic military installations. The ductwork provided access to every critical area of the base, and her custodial duties had given her legitimate reasons to study airflow patterns, structural support points, and maintenance schedules that most personnel never considered. She emerged through a ceiling vent in the communications building, positioning herself with clear sight lines to the perimeter where Kozlov had stationed his overwatch. The Russian operative monitoring the northwestern approach stood silhouetted against the snow, his thermal scope scanning for threats he expected to come from outside the installation rather than from within. Sarah calculated wind speed, distance, and trajectory from her concealed position 400 meters away, accounting for Arctic conditions that would challenge even experienced snipers. The suppressed rifle's report was barely audible above the howling wind, and the guard dropped into the snow drift where his body would remain hidden until the next patrol sweep in 20 minutes. Her route back through the service tunnels took her past the generator room, where two enemy operatives worked to permanently disable the backup power systems that could restore full communications capability. The communications specialist focused on his demolition work while his partner provided security, neither man expecting threats from the maintenance areas they had dismissed as non-tactical during their mission planning. Sarah's knowledge of the base's electrical systems allowed her to create what appeared to be catastrophic equipment failure rather than enemy action. The generator room's industrial machinery provided perfect cover for eliminating both targets without alerting their teammates to the presence of a professional operator. Sarah triggered an electrical overload that created enough noise and confusion to mask her movements, then used hand-to-hand combat techniques to neutralize both men before they could transmit warnings to Kozlov. Their deaths appeared accidental to anyone who might discover them later, victims of the same equipment failure that had plunged sections of the base into darkness. Captain Torres stood in the command center reviewing tactical displays that showed decreasing enemy contact reports without any explanation for how his outnumbered defenders were gaining ground against a superior force. His confusion was evident as he tried to coordinate responses to an engagement that seemed to be shifting in their favor despite all tactical logic suggesting the opposite outcome. The absence of expected enemy communications and the gradual restoration of some base systems indicated changes in the tactical situation that he couldn't identify or understand. Sarah's next objective required movement through areas where conventional access would expose her to enemy observation, but the base's industrial infrastructure provided concealment routes that bypassed normal security considerations. She crawled through heating ducts toward the communications tower where an enemy sniper had positioned himself to provide overwatch for the execution of captured Marines in the central courtyard. Private Chen knelt in the snow below, hands zip-tied behind his back as Kozlov prepared to make his demonstration of superior firepower. The sniper's position on the communications tower gave him commanding views of the installation's approaches, but his elevation also made him visible to anyone with sufficient skill and equipment to engage from unexpected angles. Sarah calculated the ballistics for a shot that would eliminate the threat without revealing her location to other enemy forces, using structural elements of the tower itself to mask the muzzle flash and sound signature of her rifle. The range exceeded 600 meters through crosswinds that would challenge any marksman, but Sarah's training included scenarios far more demanding than Arctic installations during winter storms. Her shot struck the enemy sniper precisely as he acquired Private Chun in his scope, the impact sending him tumbling from the tower structure to land in the snow below with enough force to suggest accidental death rather than precise elimination. Private Chen looked around in confusion as his would-be executioner disappeared from the communications tower, his survival dependent on precision shooting that had occurred without any visible source. Kozlov emerged from the generator building to investigate the disturbance, his professional instincts recognizing that equipment failures and accidental deaths were accumulating beyond the boundaries of statistical probability. Sarah repositioned through the tunnel network as Kozlov began systematically checking areas where a professional operator might establish overwatch positions. His tactical expertise told him that someone with advanced training was hunting his team, but the base's personnel roster included no one with the capabilities required for the precise eliminations he was witnessing. The absent communications and missing perimeter guards suggested coordination that went beyond anything the Christmas skeleton crew should have been able to organize. The enemy leader's voice carried clearly through the Arctic air as he spoke into his tactical radio, ordering his remaining team members to abandon their individual objectives and consolidate for a systematic sweep of the installation. Kozlov understood that his mission timeline was compromising as an unknown opponent eliminated his personnel faster than they could complete their assigned tasks. The classified Arctic defense protocols remained his primary objective, but survival had become an immediate concern. Sarah observed Kozlov's tactical adjustments from her concealed position near the main electrical junction, where cutting specific circuits would create additional confusion while she repositioned for the next phase of her counterassault. His remaining 4 operatives moved with the disciplined caution of professionals who recognized they were facing an opponent with capabilities that matched or exceeded their own training and experience. Captain Torres attempted to establish radio contact with perimeter positions that no longer responded to his calls. His growing confidence in the tactical situation balanced against confusion about how his undermanned force was succeeding against what had appeared to be overwhelming opposition. The systematic elimination of enemy communications and personnel suggested coordination between his scattered defenders, but he couldn't identify who was providing the leadership that was turning the engagement in their favor. The tactical balance had shifted from desperate defense to active hunting, though Torres couldn't explain how 8 professional attackers had been reduced to fewer than half their original strength, without corresponding friendly casualties. Sarah's invisible war was creating opportunities for the base's legitimate defenders to regroup and organize, but her continued concealment meant that the true source of their success remained mysterious to everyone except the enemy leader, who was beginning to understand the nature of his opposition. Kozlov positioned his remaining team members in defensive formations designed to protect against threats from multiple directions, his tactical experience warning him that whoever was hunting them possessed the training and equipment to strike from unexpected positions throughout the installation. The Russian operative had conducted similar assaults against dozens of military targets, but never while facing an unknown opponent who seemed to understand his tactics better than his own team members understood them. Sarah prepared to escalate her campaign as the enemy consolidated their positions for what Kozlov clearly intended as a final push toward his mission objectives. The communications building still contained classified information that could compromise NATO's Arctic defensive strategy, and the remaining 4 operatives retained enough firepower to complete their mission if they reached their target before she could eliminate them. The ghost phase of her counter-assault was ending, replaced by something more direct and considerably more dangerous for everyone involved in the engagement. Kozlov's tactical revision divided his remaining 4 operatives into 2-man teams tasked with systematically clearing the base's interior spaces where their unknown opponent had been operating with devastating effectiveness. The Russian commander understood that whoever was eliminating his personnel possessed intimate knowledge of the installation's layout, combined with professional military training that matched his own Spetsnaz background. His new strategy abandoned the original mission timeline in favor of survival tactics designed to force his adversary into direct confrontation where superior numbers might provide decisive advantage. The first 2-man team received orders to secure the administrative wing, where classified documents were stored, while the second pair moved toward the residential quarters to eliminate any remaining personnel who might possess information about their professional hunter. Sarah tracked their movements through security camera feeds in the command center, her custodial access codes allowing her to monitor enemy positions while planning intercepts that would maintain her tactical advantage through superior positioning and surprise. Dr. Patricia Vance pressed herself against the wall of the meteorological laboratory as boots echoed in the corridor outside, her civilian contractor status providing no protection against operatives who viewed anyone with access to classified weather data as potential sources of strategic intelligence. The Arctic Research Facility contained atmospheric modeling information that could affect military operations across the entire polar region, making her survival dependent on remaining hidden until rescue arrived or the attackers completed their mission and departed. Sarah observed the interrogation beginning through a ventilation grate positioned above the laboratory's main workstation. The lead operative spoke accented English as he demanded access codes for weather satellite data, his partner searching filing cabinets for physical documents while maintaining security at the laboratory entrance. Dr. Vance's cooperation could provide the enemy with information almost as valuable as the Arctic defense protocols they had originally targeted. The maintenance tunnel system allowed Sarah to approach the laboratory from below, emerging through a floor access panel that placed her behind equipment racks where she could observe the interrogation without detection. Her improvised explosive device used cleaning supplies and electrical components readily available throughout the base, creating a shaped charge designed to eliminate both targets simultaneously while appearing to result from laboratory equipment failure. The explosion shattered glassware and destroyed sensitive instruments while eliminating the 2 operatives in a manner that suggested accidental detonation of volatile chemicals rather than deliberate sabotage. Dr. Vance survived behind an overturned desk that had shielded her from the blast, her rescue appearing miraculous rather than the result of precise timing and placement by someone with demolitions training. Sarah disappeared through the floor access before smoke cleared, leaving no evidence of her presence. Captain Torres stood before the bank of security monitors in the command center, reviewing recorded footage that showed custodial worker Sarah Chen accessing restricted areas with maintenance keys during the exact time frames when enemy operatives had been eliminated. The correlation was unmistakable to anyone with tactical experience, though the implications challenged everything he thought he knew about the quiet civilian who emptied his wastebaskets. Her movements through the installation displayed knowledge of security procedures and building layouts that exceeded what any legitimate custodial worker should have possessed. The recorded evidence showed Sarah entering maintenance areas minutes before explosions occurred, exiting service tunnels near locations where enemy bodies were discovered, and accessing electrical systems immediately prior to equipment failures that had disadvantaged the attacking force. Torres realized that the systematic elimination of Kozlov's team was being conducted by someone with professional training operating under civilian cover, though her true identity and mission remained mysterious. Sarah emerged from a supply closet to find Captain Torres waiting with his sidearm drawn, his expression reflecting the confusion of an officer whose understanding of the tactical situation had been fundamentally altered by security footage review. The confrontation occurred in the narrow corridor between the communications center and administrative offices, where their conversation would be private, but where either of them could reach reinforcements if the situation required additional personnel. "You have relevant experience," Torres stated rather than asked, his weapon pointed toward the floor in a gesture that suggested caution rather than immediate threat. "The way you move through this base, the timing of equipment failures, and the systematic elimination of hostiles indicates training that goes beyond civilian employment. I need to know who you really are and what your mission involves, because right now you're the only reason we're winning this engagement." Sarah met his gaze with the steady confidence of someone accustomed to compartmentalized operations where information was provided on a need-to-know basis determined by operational security rather than rank structure. "I have experience that's relevant to the current situation," she replied, providing acknowledgement without revelation. "My background includes capabilities that can address the threats we're facing, but detailed explanations would compromise ongoing operations that extend beyond this installation." The safe house in the residential quarters contained 8 civilian contractors and support personnel who had barricaded themselves in the recreation room when the assault began. Sarah identified their location through thermal imaging displays that showed concentrated heat signatures in an area where the enemy's final 2-man team was preparing to breach entry points with explosive charges. The civilian's survival depended on eliminating the threat before shaped charges could be detonated against doors and windows. Her sniper position on the communications building provided clear sight lines to the safe house approaches where the enemy operatives were setting up for simultaneous breaches designed to overwhelm any defensive preparations the trapped civilians might have organized. Sarah's shot eliminated the lead operative as he prepared to trigger the shaped charge, the impact sending him backward into his partner while the explosive device tumbled harmlessly into the snow. The second operative attempted to retrieve the fallen shaped charge while maintaining security, but Sarah's follow-up shot struck him center mass as he exposed himself to complete the mission his partner had begun. Both eliminations occurred within seconds of each other, leaving the safe house secure and 8 civilians alive to provide witness testimony about the precision marksmanship that had saved their lives from an impossible angle. Captain Torres witnessed both shots through binoculars from the command center windows, his military experience allowing him to calculate the range and difficulty of eliminations that would challenge any military sniper. The tactical situation had shifted decisively in favor of base personnel, but the source of their salvation remained a custodial worker whose true capabilities exceeded anything in her personnel file. Her success rate against professional operators suggested training and experience that belonged to special operations units rather than civilian support staff. Kozlov emerged from the communications building with his final remaining operative, their tactical assessment confirming that they faced a single opponent with capabilities that had systematically destroyed his entire team. The Russian commander's professional pride demanded direct confrontation with whoever had eliminated 6 trained Spetsnaz operatives using tactics that demonstrated familiarity with his own methods and procedures. The mission had evolved from intelligence gathering to personal survival against an adversary whose identity and training remained unknown. The main corridor stretched between them like a battlefield where conventional cover would provide minimal protection against an opponent who had demonstrated the ability to strike from unexpected positions throughout the engagement. Sarah stood beside her custodial cart at the intersection of 3 hallways, no longer maintaining her civilian disguise as Kozlov approached with weapons ready. The professional recognition was mutual as 2 special operations veterans prepared for direct confrontation after a campaign of stealth and deception. Sarah's equipment remained concealed within her cart, but her positioning indicated access to weapons and tactical advantages that Kozlov couldn't identify or counter without risking exposure to additional personnel who might support her efforts. The base's legitimate defenders had regrouped during the engagement, creating secondary threats that complicated any assault against their primary adversary. The tactical initiative had shifted completely, transforming hunters into hunted. Torres coordinated his remaining Marines from the command center, their movements designed to support Sarah's final confrontation while avoiding interference with someone whose capabilities clearly exceeded their own. The Christmas Eve assault that had threatened to become a massacre was ending with American forces in control, though their success depended entirely on a custodial worker whose true identity would reshape everyone's understanding of base security and personnel screening procedures. The Arctic wind howled through broken windows and damaged sections of the installation as 2 professionals prepared for a confrontation that would determine whether Kozlov's assault achieved any of its original objectives or whether his entire team would be eliminated by someone who had never officially existed in any military capacity at Thule Air Base. The ghost phase of the engagement was ending, replaced by direct combat between operators whose training and experience were about to be tested against each other in circumstances neither had anticipated when the evening began. The mess hall erupted into controlled violence as Kozlov and his final operative burst through the main entrance, their assault rifles targeting the 8 remaining base personnel who had gathered there seeking protection from the systematic elimination of their comrades. Sarah abandoned her custodial cart and drew the concealed sidearm that transformed her from dismissed civilian into something that made the Russian commander's eyes widen with recognition of professional opposition. Her movement through the dining area demonstrated tactical footwork that belonged to special operations training rather than janitorial experience. Automatic gunfire shattered tables and scattered food from the abandoned Christmas celebration as Sarah used the mess hall's infrastructure to provide cover for the trapped Marines and civilian contractors. Her return fire displayed precision that forced both attackers to seek defensive positions behind overturned furniture while she coordinated the survivors' movement towards secondary exits. The gunfight revealed combat skills that shocked Corporal Jackson and Private Williams, who had spent months dismissing her as harmless support staff. Kozlov's remaining operative attempted to flank Sarah's position through the kitchen area, but her tactical awareness anticipated the maneuver with the experience of someone who had faced similar assaults in other theaters of operation. She eliminated him with a combination of close-quarters combat techniques that included hand-to-hand fighting skills no custodial worker should have possessed. The Marines witnessed her neutralize a trained Spetsnaz operator using moves that clearly indicated military special operations background. The demonstration of lethal capability ended any pretense about Sarah's true identity as she stood over the eliminated operative with professional calm that contrasted sharply with her months of quiet civilian behavior. Staff Sergeant Mills stared at her with the expression of someone whose fundamental assumptions about base personnel had been shattered by witnessing combat skills that exceeded his own military training. Her transformation from dismissed cleaner to deadly operator occurred in full view of personnel who would never again question the capabilities of seemingly harmless support staff. Kozlov recognized that his mission had failed completely as he faced an opponent whose training matched his own while possessing intimate knowledge of the installation that gave her insurmountable tactical advantages. The Russian commander's professional assessment confirmed that whoever she represented had been operating undercover for purposes that extended far beyond routine custodial duties. His survival now depended on creating leverage through hostage acquisition rather than completing his original intelligence objectives. Captain Torres entered the mess hall to coordinate the final phase of base defense, but Kozlov seized him with the desperate efficiency of someone whose options had been systematically eliminated by an opponent he couldn't defeat through conventional tactics. The Spetsnaz commander placed his sidearm against Torres' head while demanding safe passage to the roof, where extraction helicopter could retrieve him without interference from the professional operator who had destroyed his entire team. Sarah's pursuit through the base's vertical access routes demonstrated knowledge of building systems that went beyond her legitimate custodial responsibilities. She reached the rooftop ahead of Kozlov despite his head start, positioning herself where Arctic wind conditions would test the limits of any marksman's capabilities while she waited for the confrontation that would determine whether the Russian commander escaped with valuable intelligence about American Special Operations presence at Thule Air Base. The rooftop confrontation occurred in Fordham-Lepperhauer crosswinds that made precision shooting nearly impossible for anyone without extensive training in extreme weather conditions. Kozlov emerged onto the roof structure with Captain Torres as human shield, his tactical radio requesting immediate extraction from coordinates he transmitted in Russian military code. Sarah responded to his transmission in fluent Russian, identifying herself as someone familiar with Spetsnaz procedures and specific details about his past operations that were available only through classified intelligence briefings. "You led the assault on Bardufoss in November 2019, Sarah called across the rooftop distance, her voice carrying clearly despite the Arctic wind. 6 NATO personnel died during your intelligence-gathering mission, including Lieutenant Hansen, who you executed after obtaining satellite communication protocols. The Norwegian government never released those details publicly, which means you're facing someone with access to information about your professional history that extends beyond routine military intelligence." Torres realized that his rescuer possessed knowledge of classified international incidents that would be available only to intelligence operatives or special operations personnel, with security clearances far above anything associated with custodial work. Her accurate prediction of Kozlov's tactical responses and detailed familiarity with Russian military procedures confirmed that she represented capabilities the base had never officially acknowledged or documented in any personnel records he had reviewed during his command tenure. The sniper duel across the installation's roof structures tested both operators' skills under environmental conditions that would challenge the world's best marksmen. Sarah's positioning utilized cover provided by communications equipment and heating system infrastructure, while Kozlov attempted to maintain his human shield advantage despite wind conditions that affected his accuracy as much as hers. Both professionals understood that the first successful shot would determine survival for everyone involved in the engagement. Kozlov's tactical radio crackled with confirmation that extraction helicopter was inbound from international waters, his escape dependent on surviving the next few minutes against an opponent whose capabilities had systematically destroyed his mission and eliminated his entire team. The Russian commander's movement across the rooftop revealed desperation beneath his professional demeanor as he realized that American intelligence had placed someone with extraordinary skills in position to monitor his activities. Sarah calculated windage, distance, and timing for a shot that would eliminate the threat without endangering Captain Torres, whose position as human shield limited her options to a narrow window of opportunity when Kozlov would be exposed. The range exceeded 800 meters through crosswinds that would challenge any military sniper, requiring skills that confirmed her membership in the small community of operators capable of precision shooting under extreme conditions. The helicopter approached from the northeast as Sarah acquired her target through a scope that compensated for environmental factors that would have made accurate shooting impossible for anyone without her level of training and experience. Kozlov's movement pattern indicated familiarity with counter-sniper tactics, but his options were constrained by terrain and weather conditions that favored the defender over the extraction attempt he was desperately trying to coordinate. Captain Torres felt the Russian commander's grip loosen momentarily as radio communication required Kozlov's attention for coordinating final extraction procedures. The brief window of opportunity coincided with Sarah's shot placement as wind conditions created the opening she had been waiting for throughout the engagement. Her bullet struck with surgical precision that eliminated the threat, while leaving Torres unharmed despite his proximity to the target. The helicopter pilot observed his ground contact's elimination through binoculars and immediately aborted the extraction attempt, recognizing that whoever had eliminated an entire Spetsnaz team possessed capabilities that threatened his aircraft's survival. The extraction failure ended any possibility that classified information about American Special Operations presence would reach foreign intelligence services, preserving operational security for missions that extended far beyond Thule Air Base. Torres stood on the Arctic rooftop beside the woman who had saved his life and secured his installation, his understanding of base personnel forever altered by witnessing capabilities that belonged to the highest levels of military special operations. Sarah Chun was clearly someone whose presence at Thule Air Base served purposes that had nothing to do with custodial duties, though her true mission and background remained classified at levels beyond his security clearance. The Christmas Eve assault that had threatened to become a catastrophic intelligence breach was ending with complete American victory, achieved through the actions of someone whose official identity bore no resemblance to her actual capabilities. Sarah had preserved operational security while eliminating an entire professional assault team, demonstrating skills that would reshape base security procedures and personnel evaluation protocols for installations across the Arctic region. Emergency flares illuminated the installation as rescue helicopters approached from the south, their pilots guided by signals from base personnel who had survived an engagement they never should have won against professional opposition. The official after-action reports would document equipment failures and tactical errors that led to the attackers' defeat, while the true source of their salvation would remain classified at levels that protected operations extending far beyond a single Arctic military installation. Christmas morning broke across the Arctic landscape with crystalline clarity that revealed the full extent of battle damage scattered throughout Thule Air Base. Emergency flares had burned throughout the night as medical helicopters approached from the south, their pilots navigating through weather conditions that had cleared just enough to allow safe landing on the installation's primary helipad. The rescue teams expected to find casualties and devastation, but discovered instead a secure facility where all hostile forces had been eliminated by an unknown defender whose identity would reshape their understanding of military personnel screening. Colonel James Harrison stepped from the lead helicopter with the purposeful stride of someone summoned to investigate an incident that threatened operational security across multiple theater commands. His gray eyes swept the installation's damaged sections before focusing on the small group of survivors gathered near the command center, where Captain Torres was coordinating the final phases of base security restoration. Harrison's attention shifted immediately to the woman in custodial uniform standing apart from the military personnel, her posture and bearing triggering recognition that transcended her civilian disguise. "Major Chun," Harrison called across the helipad, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to addressing special operations personnel whose cover identities required careful handling. His use of rank and name caused every Marine within hearing distance to turn toward the woman they had known only as Sarah, the custodial worker. Delta Force operations require immediate debrief following any exposure of cover status, particularly when civilian personnel have witnessed capabilities that compromise future operational security. The revelation struck the surviving base personnel with the force of artillery impact as they processed the transformation of their dismissed cleaner into someone whose military rank exceeded that of their installation commander. Staff Sergeant Mills stared at Sarah with the expression of someone whose fundamental assumptions about military hierarchy and personnel capabilities had been obliterated by witnessing 18 years of special operations training emerge from behind a gray uniform and quiet demeanor. Operation Phantom Crown represented an 18-month deep cover mission designed to assess security vulnerabilities at Arctic installations where traditional inspection procedures would fail to identify weaknesses that professional adversaries could exploit. Sarah's custodial position had provided access to every critical system and security procedure at Thule Air Base, revealing gaps in defensive preparations that Kozlov's assault had exploited with devastating precision. Her detailed documentation would prevent similar vulnerabilities from compromising other installations across the northern defensive network. Captain Torres approached Harrison with the careful respect of an officer whose career had been saved by someone whose true identity he was only beginning to understand. She eliminated 8 professional operators using tactics that demonstrated familiarity with their procedures and equipment, Torres reported, his voice reflecting the awe of someone who had witnessed capabilities that exceeded his military training. Her knowledge of the base's infrastructure and security systems allowed her to conduct operations that would have been impossible for any external rescue force. The classified briefing that followed revealed Sarah's service record across 3 theater commands where her confirmed eliminations totaled 47 hostile operatives, making her one of the most lethal snipers in American military history. Harrison's presentation included operations in Afghanistan, Syria, and Eastern Europe where her capabilities had shaped outcomes that remained classified at levels beyond the security clearance of anyone stationed at Thule Air Base. Her presence as a custodial worker had been part of a program designed to identify systemic weaknesses in base security that traditional assessment methods couldn't detect. Dr. Patricia Vance listened to the briefings with growing understanding of how her rescue from laboratory interrogation had been achieved through capabilities she had never suspected in the quiet woman who had serviced her building's maintenance requirements for over a year. The precision timing and tactical knowledge required to eliminate 2 professional operators while preventing laboratory destruction indicated planning and skill sets that belonged to the highest levels of military special operations rather than civilian support staff. Harrison offered Sarah promotion to lieutenant colonel with command authority over the expanded undercover assessment program that would evaluate security vulnerabilities at installations across the Arctic Defensive Network. The position would provide official recognition for capabilities that had been operating in shadow status for nearly 2 decades, along with resources to develop additional personnel capable of conducting similar deep cover operations. Her success at Thule Air Base had demonstrated the value of placing special operations personnel in positions where they could observe and evaluate security procedures from perspectives unavailable to traditional inspection teams. Sarah declined the promotion with the quiet professionalism that had characterized her entire service record, expressing preference for continuation of field operations where her skills could provide maximum benefit to installation security across multiple theater commands. The administrative responsibilities of command position would reduce her effectiveness in roles where operational security depended on maintaining civilian cover identities that allowed access to information unavailable through official channels. Have you ever wondered how experiences like Sarah's might connect to challenges you face in your own professional or personal life? Harrison asked the assembled personnel during the final briefing session. The ability to see beyond surface appearances and recognize hidden capabilities in people around us often determines success in situations where conventional approaches prove inadequate. Her story demonstrates that extraordinary competence sometimes exists in unexpected places, waiting for circumstances that allow it to emerge and make decisive differences. The base security overhaul that followed incorporated lessons learned from Kozlov's assault and Sarah's defensive operations, creating defensive procedures that addressed vulnerabilities she had documented during her custodial assignment. Perimeter monitoring systems received enhanced capabilities for detecting professional infiltration attempts, while personnel screening procedures were revised to account for the possibility that adversaries might conduct similar reconnaissance operations using civilian cover identities. Her recommendations became standard protocols for installations where strategic value justified the highest levels of security preparation. 3 weeks later, Sarah Chun reported for custodial duties at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, where missile defense systems required security assessment through methods that traditional inspection procedures couldn't provide. Her gray uniform and quiet demeanor concealed the same capabilities that had transformed Christmas Eve at Thule Air Base from potential catastrophe into decisive American victory. The personnel at her new assignment dismissed her as harmless support staff, unaware that their most dangerous protector emptied their wastebaskets and cleaned their floors. Captain Torres implemented new protocols at Thule Air Base that reflected his enhanced understanding of how extraordinary capabilities could exist beneath unremarkable appearances. His personnel briefings emphasized the importance of recognizing that effective security sometimes depended on people whose true value remained hidden until circumstances required their emergence. The Christmas Eve assault had taught him that assumptions about civilian personnel could prove fatally incorrect when professional adversaries tested installation defenses. The official after-action reports documented equipment failures and tactical errors that led to the attacking force's elimination, while classified addendums preserved the operational details that would inform future security assessments across the Arctic defensive network. Sarah's involvement remained compartmentalized at levels that protected her continued effectiveness in similar assignments, where her success depended on maintaining civilian cover identities that allowed unrestricted access to potential vulnerabilities. Staff Sergeant Mills never again dismissed support personnel, without considering that extraordinary competence might exist beneath routine job descriptions and unremarkable uniforms. His experience at Thule Air Base had demonstrated that military effectiveness sometimes came from sources that defied conventional expectations about rank, position, and apparent capabilities. The quiet custodial worker who had saved their lives by eliminating an entire professional assault team had forever changed his understanding of how security and competence operated within military installations. Sarah's custodial cart rolled through the corridors of Malmstrom Air Force Base with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized her work at Thule, its hidden compartments containing equipment that no maintenance worker should have possessed. Her new assignment would assess security vulnerabilities around America's most sensitive nuclear assets, where the margin for error was measured in global rather than regional consequences. The personnel who passed her in the corridors saw only another civilian cleaner, unaware that their installation's security was being evaluated by someone whose capabilities could reshape their understanding of protection and preparedness. The Arctic wind continued its relentless assault on Thule Air Base, but the installation's defenses now reflected lessons learned from confronting professional opposition that had tested every system and procedure to the breaking point. Captain Torres stood in the command center reviewing security displays that showed defensive capabilities enhanced through recommendations from someone whose true identity would remain classified long after her transfer to new assignments. Christmas Eve had become a milestone in Arctic defensive preparation, though the full story of their salvation would never appear in any document accessible to personnel without the highest security clearances. Emergency generators hummed with reliable efficiency through systems that had been upgraded following Sarah's assessment of vulnerabilities that had nearly cost them everything. The base operated with enhanced security awareness born from understanding that threats could emerge from any direction and salvation might come from the most unexpected sources. Her legacy lived in procedures and attitudes that would protect future personnel from adversaries who studied American installations with the same professional competence that Kozlov had brought to his Christmas Eve assault.